everyone. I'm Joseph Roberson, aka Professor Joe, the athletic counselor and professor at Los Angeles Pierce College, as well as co-host of the podcast King Talk, where we talk about youth sports. So today we wanted to try something a little different, and I'll give you a little background understanding as to why. So Grace Kilsey, our executive producer, made mention to me, hey Joseph, maybe you should also speak with young people and their parents who are interested in youth sports and sports in general about, aspects of caring for yourself when you're young that relate to also things like what you put in your body as well as nutrition. So now that's one part of what leads to today's discussion. Another part of it was I am connected to a lot of my previous student athletes through social media. And so I noticed this crazy phenomenon where, and I think I experienced it as well, where maybe 3 years after their playing careers are over, students really begin to peak in their understanding of how to train and care for their body in a way that could have greatly increased the probability of them having the desired outcomes when they were competing, whether that was in youth sports, high school, or college. So therefore, I began to see a relationship to a statement made to me by Chris Hayes. What's up, Chris? How you doing? And the statement went like this. It didn't come from him. I just don't know where it actually came from other than hearing it from him. It went, the opportunity of a lifetime has to be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. And that kind of goes back to what Grace was sharing about how you care for your body. That goes back to the situation with me observing my student athletes peaking after their opportunities to compete at the collegiate level had passed them by. And what it really began to make me think about was kind of the topic of time management and how we use our time, and really seeing time as this very important resource that it is. I personally feel that time, other than life itself, and maybe oxygen, water, air, is the most precious resource we possess, in part because you can't get time back. So let's pretend today is, and for many of the student athletes I work with, let's pretend today is August 26th, 2019 at 3 p.m. in Woodland Hills, California. And let's say there was something you were supposed to do at this moment that was going to be the building block or catalyst to the outcomes that you desire to achieve in your future, but you didn't do it. Well, the opportunity at that moment to do it so you could proceed forward has now passed. And no matter how much money you have, how intelligent you are, no matter how good of a person you are, you can't go back and get that moment back. So it's imperative that we understand the value of time as a resource, especially as it relates to your youth, because you can't get that back. And I'm saying that especially as a 47-year-old individual. You can't go back and relive your youth. You can't go back and get that time back. So it's imperative that you use it wisely, and especially as it relates to managing it. Now, we even use that expression as it relates to value, that time is money. And if I asked you how much money you had, you would know. But if I ask you how much time you have, do you automatically know? How much time in a week? 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. Does that equal 168? I think I'm right. I could be wrong. Go check. My math is questionable, right? But if we say 168, so let's say that real quick. Let's say we have 168 hours in 1 week. Hey, one time someone was evaluating me teaching and they said, never turn your back to people when you write on the board, but I don't know how I'm going to write on the board if I don't turn my back. Right? So 168 hours in a week. So let's say you had $168. You would know by the end of the week where you spent your money. But by the end of the week, do you know where you spent your time? So let's say that out of that 168 hours, there's an expectation that you spend time getting rest, especially if you're participating as an athlete with what you put your body through. So let's say we sleep, what? If there's 7 days in a week, and we say we hope, right? Reasonable as a youth, and as an athlete, as someone putting your body through rigorous activity. So what is that, 56? So, wow. So right away, we've lost essentially 1/3, 33.3333% of this valuable resource with one activity, and that's just sleeping. You got it? Now let's say you are a young person in high school. You also have to attend school. Does that make sense? You have to attend school. So what is high school? Is that about 6 hours a day nowadays? So I could say 6 times 6, 36, right? But what if I just say 5? I don't know what it's averaging. So let's say I just say 5 times 6, and we say that's 30, and we take that away. So where are we at? We at 82, right? So we've essentially lost about 50% of our time with just sleep and going to school. Are you starting to see the value of how we use this resource? Now, if you're competing in athletics, how often do you train as a member of your team? I'm kind of detached from the high school setting, so I'm not sure. Let's say in college, I'm familiar with the fact that it's a little more. But let me say in high school, is it fair to say 2 hours a day you have to be at practice? So then we say that's another 10, we're at 72, and that's for practice. Now let me explain something to you about youth athletics, even at the high school level, especially moving forward from there. If the only time you practice is with your team, you're not going to be one of the best competitors. So therefore, we know this is minimal. This is minimal. However, the term we look at is student athlete. So this is minimal, but this isn't priority because we still have to address that part of our identity. So technically the rule is that for every 1 hour of class time, you should essentially be committing somewhere near the average of 2 hours outside of class. So if we talked about this is how much time you're committing in class in school, even if we minimalize it and said an hour for an hour, let's take it lower and say 30 minutes for every hour. That will still end up being what? Another 15 hours of our time a week studying. You can be the greatest athlete, and if you don't have the appropriate grades and the appropriate courses with the appropriate GPA, then even if a school came to look for you, you're not going to be in a position to accept a scholarship. So you have to understand the student part of our identity related to studying, of course, that's going to be important. Now, again, where are we at in terms of this resource, right? Where are we at? 5 from 12, so we at 7. Wow. So you're telling me all we've done is sleep, go to school. That's actually be in school. That didn't involve go to school. You got to arrive at school, which means you have to travel. So we didn't count travel time in there. So that's just sleep, in class, practice, and studying. And we've already lost close to 2/3, right, of time as a valuable resource. So therefore, again, we have to be very thoughtful about how we're spending our time, especially since there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Outliers. And one of the things he discusses, and I'm sure it's discussed in other publications as well, that this idea of 10,000 hours, right? And I think it was Bruce Lee who discussed 10,000 repetitions. And even if we didn't hold ourselves to those numbers specifically, what we're addressing is the fact that to really develop expertise in something, or to develop at a level required to be highly successful in something, and again, get the outcomes that most of us desire when we compete as athletes, there's a significant amount of time that has to be committed. So if this is what we're working with, where are we going to get those 10,000 hours, those 10,000 repetitions, unless we really begin to be thoughtful about how we're using our time? You got it? Does that make sense? Then, especially for young people, we have all these additional distractions. When I was younger, we had about 4 television channels. You could come home and maybe watch after school specials on 1 or 2 of them, but most of the television programming really wasn't gonna be for kids after a certain point in the day. So maybe we go outside and play, or no doubt you had to spend time addressing your homework, but it was less distractions. Now you have to consider for young people a big distraction and a great consumer of time because of the time spent on social media. So do you see where that's an A? My bad. So, do you see where it becomes even more imperative to your success that you make some determinations in a wise way about how you use your time? Now, real quick, I'm not going to go into too much detail, right? I'm not going to overkill on the detail, but I want to tell you why this becomes imperative. Again, you've got to remember, we can't get our time back, and I haven't went over everything else. At some point, you got to use the bathroom. At some point, you got to care for your hygiene. At some point, you have to eat right. And I haven't even put those things in here. At some point, you want to enjoy yourself. At some point, you might want to play video games. At some point, you might want to watch TV, right? But how do those things factor in to how you use your time? So again, the point I'd like you to walk away with from this brief discussion is that time is a valuable resource. And you need to be thoughtful about how you use it because you can't get a moment of it back. Okay? Now, that being said, let's transition that into this concept of long and short-term goals. At some point, I'll have a discussion. No, I'm going to do it right now. The reality is we all have dreams. Every human you talk to has a dream. But the reality is not many people are capable of transitioning their dreams into a tangible goal. And then understanding that you have both long-term goals and then you have short-term goals to support those, right? To support the long-term goals. So we could say long-term and short-term is subjective. I could say long-term is 15 years from now and short-term is 5 years from now. I could say long-term is 6 months from now and short-term is what are we going to do this week in order to arrive at those outcomes. You got it? So what we know, again, going back to that saying I mentioned, Chris Hayes said to me, the opportunity of a lifetime has to be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. When we talk about opportunity, we refer to it as a window. There's a window of opportunity, and what we know about windows, it can be open, it can be closed. So at some point, that window of opportunity can be closed. So if you desire to compete as a high school athlete, and going back to the comment I made about my student athletes, even at the community college level, you have to be positioning yourself to compete at this moment, not peaking 3 years from now when this opportunity is no longer available to you. So if you desire to potentially earn a scholarship coming out of high school, okay, well, then by your senior year, you have had to do something special that demands that an institution of higher education offers you a scholarship opportunity. You can't do it 5 years after you're out of high school. It's not going to be the same outcomes. So that being said, if you talk about you're in high school and you have 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, well then one of the things you have to learn how to do is, well, what are your goals for 12th grade? And I need specific. If you want to be a dominant athlete, I don't need you to tell me, I want to be the best. That's too vague. That's too ambiguous. What does it take to be the best? What are the best accomplishing in your sport in the 12th grade that dictates that they're the best? Okay, well then you need to make that your goal. Then, well, how do you arrive at that? Because it doesn't magically come, right? It doesn't magically come. You're not going to begin preparing somewhere in the summer between your junior and senior year and all of a sudden arrive at those outcomes, right? So if this is your long-term goal, we're talking about, well, what are the short-term goals that begin when? That begin now, right? Never put off till later what you can get done today, all right? So In the future, I'll go into more detail on it, right? And we'll talk about maybe goal setting, long-term and short-term, as it relates to the SMART technique. But for right now, I want you to understand how important time is as a resource. I want you to understand that time has to be managed. And I want you to understand that it's necessary if you truly desire to arrive at your goals, that no doubt should have a direct translation to what your dreams are. That's it for today. I'm Professor Joe. Thank you for tuning in.